Chapter 6. Ear to the Ground. "Oh, Hannah, I must go now," Nancy said hurriedly. "I'll call again." She hung up the phone and rushed from the booth. Roscoe motioned her to follow him. A short distance ahead, a gray-haired man with a decided limp was approaching the building. He had a full mustache and a chin beard. This can't be Kit Cadle, Nancy told herself. And yet there seemed to be something familiar about the man. Roscoe introduced him and Nancy. "Pleased to meet you," Mr. Wilson said in an affected voice. Nancy found herself staring intently at him. Could he be Kit Cadle in disguise? Mr. Wilson smiled. "Aren't you the girl I saw hacking at a tree near a dig site?" "Yes, I am," Nancy replied. When she gave no explanation, he asked her why she was doing it. Nancy smiled and replied, "Just examining the oak." She changed the subject. "Weren't you staying at the Riverside Hotel in St. Louis?" The man shook his head. "Never heard of it," he said in his affected voice, and limped off. Nancy wondered where he was going. At that moment, Art roared up on his motorcycle. Nancy climbed aboard and they headed for the dig. Art asked her if she had learned anything. "Yes and no," she replied. "I talked with Mr. Wilson. I think he's Kit Cadle in disguise." "Whether he's Kit Cadle or Tom Wilson," said Art, "I advise you to forget him." "Okay," Nancy agreed. "At least I won't talk about him." "Don't get the wrong idea," Art said. "I want to see you solve the mystery, and I'd like to help. But right now, let's just enjoy this ride." Nancy made a point of doing just that. She and Art laughed and joked the rest of the way to the dig. They found everyone else at work. The only person not in or around the pit was Julianne, whose turn it was to prepare luncheon. She was in the kitchen, struggling with an old-fashioned oil-burning stove. "This oven just won't get hot," she complained. "I'm afraid to turn the burgers any higher for fear I might blow up the whole house." As Nancy helped her adjust the stove, she told Julianne about Mr. Wilson. Then, after changing her clothes, she went to the barn, which was being used as a laboratory. Several students were seated at trestle tables, brushing dirt from bones and bits of pottery. One girl was patiently putting together pieces of a broken bowl. "What can I do to help?" Nancy asked Teresa. "Dig," she answered with a smile. Teresa handed Nancy a child-sized shovel, a teaspoon, a fine sieve, and a camel's hair dusting brush. "Every inch of ground is important," the leader said. "You must work very carefully in order to not discard anything worth saving." Nancy promised to be cautious and walked over to the excavation in front of the farmhouse. It seemed much larger than when she had first arrived. Nevertheless, she scrambled down the side, thinking, if they go much deeper, the diggers will need a ladder. After watching the other workers for several minutes, Nancy knelt and gently used the little shovel to place earth in the sieve. Carefully, she crumbled it through the fine wire mesh. All that remained in the strainer were several pieces of gravel. After 4 tries, she had about decided there was nothing in that spot, when a tiny piece of white caught her eye. She moved closer to it, and this time used her teaspoon. Suddenly, she had a chunk of earth on it, which contained a piece of bone. Excitedly, Nancy put it into the sieve and gently shook the dirt. In a few moments, a bone fragment half an inch long lay exposed. Gleefully, Nancy cried out, "I've found something!" The other diggers hurried to her side. "Do you think it's a finger bone?" asked Julianne, who had joined the group. At once, Claire Warwick spoke up. "That's obviously a metatarsal bone, not a phalange." "Not a what?" asked Nancy. "Phalange. That's what we scientists call toe or finger bones," Claire replied loftily. "But this is neither one. It's part of the skeleton of the forefoot." "Wait a minute," said Teresa, stepping forward. "Let's see that." Nancy handed her the bit of bone. "This is a segment of an infant's finger," said Teresa. "Better check your anatomy book again, Claire." Two boys, with whom Claire was not popular, burst into laughter. "Better watch out, Claire," said Bill Munson. "The first thing you know, you'll be connecting the ankle bones to the neck bones." The girl flushed angrily, but said nothing. Teresa urged Nancy to look for more of the skeleton, and she worked diligently the rest of the day, but had no luck. Finally, it was quitting time. The weary diggers came to the surface and went to change their clothes. Some started to prepare supper. Nancy came outside and dropped to the ground for a brief rest and to think about the secret in the hollow oak. She found herself dozing and turned on her side. Suddenly, her attention was directed to a sound she detected on the ground. Listening closely, Nancy decided it was a car. Who was coming? She sat up and watched the road that led to the dig. No car appeared, so again the young detective put her ear to the ground and listened. Now there was nothing but silence. Someone must have parked, she thought. The idea made her uneasy. She stood up and went into the house. A few of the boys had gathered in the living room. Nancy told them what she had heard. "Maybe I'm silly to be suspicious," she said, "but I have a hunch that Kit Cadle may come here and attempt some mischief. You know, 2 people have warned me against him." Art spoke up. "I don't think you're silly at all. This house and the dig should be protected as well as you. Okay with you guys if we take turns standing guard here at night?" "Great idea," replied Bob Snell. "You give out the shifts and I'll be on the job." Nancy smiled at them all. "I'm sorry to be a troublemaker in your group, but—" "Stop that!" Art interrupted her. "It will be an exciting change to play detective." He arranged time shifts and took the first one himself. Dinner was announced. The group ate heartily and retired early. Nancy found it hard to sleep. She could not keep her mind off the fact that Kit Cadle might show up at the farmhouse. If so, what would he try to do? She felt sure he was the one who had let the goat into the house. This time his mischief might cause serious harm. Finally, after tossing and turning for an hour, she got up, pulled on her clothes, and went outdoors. It was a bright, starry night, and objects were clearly distinguishable. Almost instantly, Art was at her side. He gave a low chuckle. "I thought you were Kit Cadle's girlfriend." Nancy grinned and started to walk around the farmhouse with him. Just then they became aware of light footsteps not far away. The couple hid behind bushes. The stealthy footsteps came from the rear of the house. Nancy and Art fully expected someone to enter the front door. Instead, they saw a man going toward the dig, carrying a ladder. Moving quietly, the couple followed him across the yard and into the field. They saw the figure set the ladder into the excavation. Nancy whispered, "It's time to act." She and Art loped with light steps toward the dig. The man heard them and turned quickly. Nancy recognized him. Art beamed his flashlight on the figure. "Tom Wilson," Nancy whispered. They ran toward the man to question him about why he had come there. But before they could reach him, Wilson took off like a frightened deer. "He's not limping," Nancy observed, as she and Art pursued the fleeing figure. "We mustn't lose him," she exclaimed. Wilson was fleet-footed. He had gone straight up the road, but to the young people's amazement had outdistanced them. When they lost sight of him, Nancy stopped and put her ear to the ground. "He's still on the road," she reported, catching up to Art. A few seconds later, Nancy listened again. They were closer now. She and Art put on extra speed. "We're catching up," she gasped. They raced along the road like marathon runners. End of chapter 6.